speak very much for his speech, we now move into the second part of the debate, and to open the case, the closing argument T of Tilbury.
Alright, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for the floor. Now, before coming to the positive matter, I am up to some rebuttal to what we just heard from the opposition side. First of all, we were actually blamed that this policy is going to be ineffective. And the example they came up with was, yeah, basically it was already abolished, physical disciplinary measures were already abolished in schools. And that is a perfect example why we should also do it, should not allow it to the police to do it as well. Now, what we say is that the context and the relationships that exist in schools are totally different to the concept and relationships we have on the streets each and every day. That is an educational environment in schools where you have to learn about science, where you learn about math. So these kind of teachers do have to have a different authority than the actually policeman on the street when it comes to slapping a kid. Because the policeman has to tell the children that this is about breaking the law. That is not the duty of any one teacher in our country. Teachers teach things to children, and they tell them what they have to learn. And there might be any kind of disciplinary measures, and we believe, okay, it might be true that in that kind of educational context, physical disciplinary measures might not be good. However, when it comes to making sure that children understand that breaking the law is wrong, then we believe this is a different context, and it can be justified, and we believe these authorities do have to have that kind of tool. Then they were talking about, well, this is going to be arbitrary and it's going to be disproportionate, different in any kind of cases. And ladies and gentlemen, we do trust our policemen. We do trust the police. And why do we do this? Because we train them and we educate them. And we believe in them as representing the authority, as representing the state, as the most authority that we have in our country. So we also believe that policemen will be able to judge upon the situation, that they will be able what kind of proportional punishment it takes when it comes to actually disciplinating this child in this concrete situation. And we do believe in our policemen, and we believe we trained them well enough. And then we generally talked about, well, what we're doing here is taking the easy way out. And there must be different ways in how to punish these kids, and actually there's a different, wrong approach. And we say, right, we have to improve education in our system. We have to make sure that schools get better, and probably in the very long run, those kind of bad things won't occur, that we actually need this kind of disciplinary measures. But very concrete criminal acts that are against the law also need concrete consequences. And we believe saying that this is the easy way out might be true, but it's still a fact that it is necessary, that there have to be consequences to criminal acts, also for children under the age of responsible criminal age. No, not yet. So, I'm going to talk about two things. I'm going to talk about, first, about children's development and how this law, if implemented, perfectly fits in the kind of children's development we assume that there is and we believe that there is. And then I'm going to talk about the nature of physical punishment and why it's going to work especially well for children. Now, the first thing we have to wonder about, that is what we believe, is who are actually the people who are concerned by these laws. And it's children who actually, in young age, engage in criminal acts already on a regular basis. And what does it tell us? It tells us that the moral framework these kinds of kids have been given from their parents has failed already. So they don't know what kind of borders they have, and they don't know what kind of borders they actually can cross. And that is very, very bad, because it happens in an age where it is so important that young people do have a moral framework and know what is right and know what is wrong. Because what happens if they don't? They actually create deeply rooted behaviors that are wrong. And it's so difficult to change them later on. It is very, very difficult. And we believe if parents cannot cope with the task of actually providing this moral framework to their children, then what state has to do is provide an educational alternative. Not because we want that, because we want to punish the parents, or we think this is just a crazy good idea, but for the sake of the children. This is fair for the children. Children need to be corrected, otherwise it's going to be unfair for them, because there was nobody showing them what is right and what is wrong. And we believe if parents cannot cope with that, then state has to. Now, what it also shows, for example, is a state puts adults into prison when they've done something wrong. And we also see this as an alternative to prison, because the educational thing that you learn in prison is very, very small. I mean, what kind of thing do you learn in prison? We shouldn't over-exaggerate that. It might be that you do not take up the soap, but that's basically it. So what we feel is that in the age of these teenagers, there is still educational hope. And that is reflected by the measure we are taking here. So we see is there is educational hope. There is the time of forming a personality in these kind of ages. And that is while we do have physical punishment. It is only a reflection of that kind of statement. We put adults into prison because we see it's very hard to change them, and we shouldn't overestimate any kind of educational reason there might be in prison. But we see educational hope with the young children and with the young people, and we believe that is why physical punishment is much more effective than actually putting them into prison, or maybe as an alternative just lowering the rate of the age of responsibility for crimes. Yeah.
Okay, if a child steals a candy bar and is therefore slapped by the police, will think I did something wrong, or will be angry at the policeman and the law that he stands for?
He will think he did something wrong because he will learn by this to respect authorities. That is exactly what this kind of measure is for. And this perfectly leads me to the point of the nature of physical punishment. And it's already what's slightly touched by first proposition. Now, the goal of any kind of physical disciplinary measures is to create associations. What we want to make sure is that children have a horizon where they can say, okay, if I take that kind of action, it leads to that kind of consequence. So bad action X leads to bad consequence Y. And what this does also is reflects the intellectual background children have. It is a very primitive way of punishing people, we do admit that, but what it does is it reflects how children work and how children understand their environment. Because we can engage in somehow controversial issues with adults and try to explain them why this is wrong and why, and maybe change it to the better like that way. But we can't really do that with children because we might have to fear that they just don't understand us. So we believe primitive action is good for the children because it reflects the intellectual background the intellectual surrounding these children have. This is not because we just say, oh, all children are stupid. It is simply something that is adjusted to the children's minds, and we believe that's a very good thing. So for the reason that we believe children's development is crucial, and this policy fits perfectly into that kind of thinking. And as we believe the nature of physical punishment also fits to that, we probably stand in proposition.